The Joyful Friar podcast is made possible by the generous support of our friends. To support the podcast, please visit nathan-castle.com and donate today. Hello and welcome to this edition of the Joyful Friar podcast. I'm Father Nathan Castle, your host. I'm calling this edition the frat party edition because the wall behind me faces an alley, and on the other side of the alley is a fraternity house that's cranking up for a loud party tonight. So you might hear the whatever it is they're doing, they've just got a new speaker system, which I suppose is louder than the previous one. God only knows. Anyway, I'm going to attempt to do a podcast for you. That's the third part of a trilogy. The previous two podcasts have been about B, the big band singer. If you go back to 2 episodes ago, I told her story in brief. It's told at the end of Afterlife Interrupted Book 2, but in short, she was discovered like off the farm because of her voice. At 18 years old, she was hired to be a lead singer in a big band era group in the late 30s, I think, or right about 1940, somewhere in there. She toured with this group that was all male except for her. At first, they were doing engagements that were close to her home. Then there were trips that were within a day or two, and then after that, further afield. She was housed in a hotel with her male co-workers and discovered that they had a key to her room and let themselves in. She told us she had to fight off her bosses in her own room and in her own bed. So she was serially sexually assaulted. She didn't think that it was rape because she thought that rape was stranger assault in the street or something like that. She wished it would all go away. She didn't know what to do except pretend that it wasn't happening, let them do what they wanted so they'd leave. She could wash up and get some sleep and go to work the next day with these people. So pretty awful. She got pregnant by somebody and she didn't know who. She didn't see a way forward in that predicament other than the one that she ultimately opted for, which was to what she called take matter into her own hands with a pistol. She arranged to shoot herself in the torso so that it wouldn't look too blatantly obvious as a suicide, that maybe the men could make up a story about cleaning the gun or some other way that it might have been accidental, which she said was what actually transpired after her death. Anyway, she came to us in a dream, as all of these stories in the Afterlife Interrupted books do. My prayer partners and I worked with her. She was ready to move from an afterlife level to a next that was a lot more free and represented the healing that she had done to be able to make that crossing or passage. I explained in the last episode that the person who greeted her was also in the entertainment field during that same period of time and was well aware of the way that women were maltreated. That turned out to be Margaret Hamilton, an old friend of mine from my prayer life of writing the Wizard of Oz book that you can see on the wall behind me. Margaret said, I know exactly what was happening in that time period. I'll take it from here. Margaret arranged for them to go on a girl date where they got dressed up. B was happy to say that shopping here is so great. Everything is in your size and your color and it doesn't cost anything. She had a concern that was it safe to look good in the presence of men, because it hadn't been earlier. And she was assured by Margaret that no, nothing bad like that happens here. So that's their B story in brief. Last time I dealt with what we call compassionate response to that story, how it might have landed in the lives of people who have heard it over the last several years since it's been in the public. And today I'm dealing with what I call spiritual practice for anybody. I'm going to confine myself in this episode to persons who have suffered the loss of a loved one to suicide. Although I think you'll hear that the things that I'm going to offer could be pertinent in lots of other life circumstances. And I'm not doing this from some disinterested academic point of view. I'm sharing with you some things that I think of as tools that I use from time to time in my own life. And so I'm going to try sharing them with you. There are three of them in particular. One is going to come from C.S. Lewis, and I think my favorite book of all time, the Screwtape Letters. Another is going to be from the work of Byron Katie, who was on one of my earlier shows. And the final one is going to be from the Desiderata, which I was given a copy of when I was graduating high school. And I think it's good to have several different kinds of things that you can keep kind of in your own spiritual toolbox to use according to your mood or your circumstance, whatever is going on. So with that, I'll get started with C.S. Lewis. If you haven't read the Screwtape Letters, I can't recommend them more highly. C.S. Lewis was an Anglican Christian writing this book, and I think about 1938, 39, 40, right about the time The Wizard of Oz was created and the time that B's career was going on. It's what I call a wickedly funny book. I have a CD set of John Cleese reading it, and it's just hysterical. He's so funny anyway. But it's a very unusual premise for a theological book. First of all, it's an allegory, and it's very easy to read, and I think funny, but it's profound. What he's done is create a book that purports to be an intercepted correspondence between demons. Screwtape, who's in the title, is a master demon who's been charged with helping an apprentice demon ruin his first human soul. So the elder demon is going to use all of his wiles and tricks to describe to his mentee Wormwood how to ruin a human soul. The part that I'm going to quote from here, and I'm going to read to you a little bit, is from the 15th chapter of it. The chapters are all really brief. They just touch upon some topic, and then he moves into it real quickly and gets off of it. The premise of the book is that it was a written correspondence back and forth between the two, and half of it's been lost, but what we have is the mentor's response to a report that was submitted earlier in the week. But you can gain from the part that we have here what the other part was about. Anyway, Wormwood is trying to teach Screwtape is trying to teach Wormwood about ruining a human soul by messing with time. He points out that the angels, including the fallen angels, are not natives to time. They were not born in it. They can enter it and move in it, but it's not their native land, and so they're at a bit of a disadvantage because they have to learn its ways. They have to learn about time. Well, he's teaching this apprentice about how to ruin a human soul primarily by getting that soul off the present moment. He explains that time is broken up into past, present, and future, and that each of those three parts of time have characteristics about them, but he encourages Wormwood to keep his patient, this human soul he's trying to ruin, from being in the present. He says, our enemy, which is God, our enemy destines the humans to eternity. Therefore, he wants them to attend chiefly to eternity itself, which is that point of time which they call, the present. For the present is the point at which time touches eternity. Let me slow that down. The present, God lives in the eternal present. God is always present. And when I want to be most at home in God, and when I want to have my spirit resting in God, I try to pay attention to the present moment. You know how your imagination can drift into the future or climb back into the past, and particularly because this episode is dealing with grief after a death by suicide. It can be very hard to stay in the present moment without drifting into the past, into should-haves, or if only I had, or saddening oneself with thoughts of happy times in the past that will never be again, that kind of thing. Screwtape would say that's a great thing to do, because you want to sadden the human. Why should they be happy anyway? That's how he ends the chapter. So he describes the present moment as the moment that's most like eternity, which is most like God. He said our business is to get them away from the eternal and the present. With this in view, we sometimes tempt a human, say a widow or a scholar, to live in the past. But this is a limited value because they have some knowledge of the past, and it has a determinate nature, and so sometimes it resembles eternity. The past is fixed and no longer flows. There are true things that one can say about it, and the dark side never wants to deal with the truth. They always want to deal in lies or some skewed perception of things. I bring that up because I'm as prone to anyone else, especially when I'm sad or depressed, to think about some past event that's landed me here. This occurrence, this setback, this argument, insult, this death, and the way that it occurred makes me angry and frustrated and sad and despairing and so on. All of that can happen when we spend a lot of time in the past with our kind of spirit unguarded. When I notice that in myself, I try to shake myself out of it, and I ask for the grace of the present moment. I ask God to help me be still and be present. And I think we're at our truest when we are just in the present moment. When we're in the present moment, it might not be our favorite present moment, but it's the one we have. And so that, in my practice, involves gratitude for it. I'm grateful for this present moment. I don't have to judge it and compare it with other moments necessarily. I could just be still in it and let it be. Does that sound impossible to you? You could try it. You might just do some quieting and deep breathing, moving away from all technology and other distractions, and just breathing in and out, remembering that you're inspiring. That's the Greek word for breathe in, to inspire. Breathe in spirit. It nourishes you all the time. It's feeding the cells of your body. But on the way out, expiring is dying to everything toxic that needs to leave you. So sometimes, just to be in the present moment, that's all I do. I just sit still and quiet. Sometimes I'll light a candle. You might prefer a scented candle or some incense, something that has something pleasant to smell or see. That can help. But to be in the present moment, whatever present moment it is, and just accept that you're in it, and then be grateful for your life. That's what I do anyway. Lewis goes on to talk about getting. He has one phrase where he said, the past is static and no longer flows. We can get people to obsess over it, and we've had great success with widows in this regard. Wouldn't that be a sad thing if, because of the loss of your spouse, you lost the present moment too, and instead descended into a whole bunch of sadness about what is no longer, and so on. He says, we've had great success with widows in that regard. See if you can get them off the present moment by getting them to wallow in the past. He says, short of that, there's another thing you can do, which is to try to get them anticipating the future. He describes the future as being the least real part of time because it hasn't occurred yet. It always has some improbability about it, uncertainty about it because it hasn't happened yet. And he said that can be great campaigning ground. You can get your patient, he sometimes calls them, to think about the future in ways that perhaps they can try to plan it and control it, and that at some point they'll realize that that's impossible and they'll be frustrated at their own attempts. You can take up our energy by getting us to try to plan for a future and then be angry that it rained on the day of the picnic or whatever it is, that I tried my best to make a great plan and it failed. See, I'm a failure, that kind of thing. Or curse the heavens because it rained when I wanted sunshine. He talks about more than sunshine and picnics. He was writing at the time that the war in Europe, the Second World War, had already begun, and there was a lull in the fighting, he said. And so there was a moment to kind of regroup, reconsider, but because there was still a war on, there was plenty of ominous things that could happen in the future, and you can get your patient to be worrying over them and seeing only darkness in the future, which of course is depressing. He says the main thing you don't want to do is to get the patient to stay in the present moment, and you don't want them to ask for the energy, the grace to do the present duty that this present moment demands. He goes into the fact that sometimes for humans living in the present, they have to borrow from a future in order to do the present duty. I was responsible for having this podcast done today because my assistant needs to get it to edit it. So, and it needs to be available to you several days from now. So I'm borrowing from the future, but it becomes today's duty. Anybody that's in a marriage or raising kids or careers, and all of us have things that we're doing today that are really about something in the future. It's not that we're flying into some fantasy of the future. It's just that there are practical things that need to be done step by step in the present moment in order for the future thing that we want to have come about happen. I'm recording this just a week before Thanksgiving, and I've already had to put the menu together, make sure that different people who are coming will bring certain things and so on. You just don't throw Thanksgiving dinner together in the present moment that morning. It does take borrowing from the future, but that's not really what Lewis and Screwtape are talking about. They're talking about getting us to move into a future in a way that upsets us in the present, makes us nervous, anxious, despairing, something like that. So I would encourage you to check your work. If you're finding that you're spending some part of your time or too much of your time worrying about the future or dwelling on the past, find C.S. Lewis, find the Screwtape Letters. It's chapter 15. It's not difficult to read. It might help you to kind of check your work and see when you're drifting off into leaving the present moment, because when you do, it really becomes shifting sand. What he says to do is make sure they don't stay in the present, and for heaven's sakes, don't let them ask the enemy, that is God, for the grace to live in the present moment. In the Christian tradition, we have a prayer called the Lord's Prayer, or the Our Father, and in it we say, "Give us today our daily bread." We don't ask for a bakery or a fleet of trucks delivering bread. We ask for the bread that we need today. Feed me today, please. I think that creates a bond and a reliance upon the Creator who brought us into being. So anyway, present moment, as it might be explained in C.S. Lewis in the Screwtape Letters. Another one is the work of Byron Katie. She was on the podcast not very many episodes ago. In fact, you can go into the archived videos. I like watching the video of the Joyful Friar podcast. And anyway, whether you listen or view them, they're in the archived ones. The work of Byron Katie. She created this, or she said more received, I guess, this method that she just calls the work. She has this little rhyme that she uses to help us take stock of our emotions and the thoughts that drive our emotions. She has this rhyme that goes, hate your neighbor, write it down, ask 4 questions, turn it around. Well, where would you find a spiritual teacher like me or Byron Katie saying, hate your neighbor? Well, in the work of Byron Katie, that's where. She thinks that the ego often deals in accusations. I wouldn't be unhappy if it weren't for what he did or what she said, so on. And that very often we can be upset about the behavior of somebody other than ourselves and create a narrative in our head that saddens us. Even if the narrative is true, in her estimation, it doesn't really matter because we're the ones in charge of our thoughts, our emotions, and especially our actions. So she encourages you to just have a full-bore session of sitting down with a piece of paper about something you're upset about and writing down everything that comes to mind. And if it involves hating your neighbor, accusing people of all kinds of things, don't leave anything out. This is not for the public. It's only in your own private space. And sometimes when I find myself sad, confused, grieving, I'll use her method. I'll sit down and I'll write down every thought that occurs to me that accuses or is negative. Somebody else's fault, God's fault, whatever. Walk away from it maybe and come back to it a second time and add more to the list. Anyway, she says, when you're finished writing it down, ask 4 questions and turn it around. I would do that in prayer because I believe I'm always in the presence of the Holy Spirit, which doesn't mean that I'm always thinking pleasant thoughts. I can be in the presence of the Holy Spirit and be a jerk. But if I focus and sit still and humbly ask for the gift of wisdom, I'm given it. So what she says to do is ask 4 questions of that sheet of paper that you just wrote down. First of all, is it true? Really simple question. Is it true? Well, we can lie, can't you? I know I can. And sometimes it seems attractive. And sometimes you deceive yourself and don't even think you are lying when in fact you are. Sometimes and most any kind of lie has some truth in it. Otherwise, it'd be completely preposterous and absurd. But that whatever that kernel of truth is gets overblown and overgrown, over exaggerated to the point where the thing you're saying is really no longer true. So is it true? Ask yourself, is it true? In her opinion, your ego is going to defend itself and essentially say, well, of course it's true because I thought it and I wrote it down. And what I say goes. Well, that's just arrogant, but that's what the ego will sometimes do, especially when it's wounded. And it could be the wounding was death by suicide of a loved one, which is, why we're talking about this today. You could have angry thoughts that are all around that event. And whatever those angry thoughts are, if you get them down specifically, you can ask yourself, with the help of the Holy Spirit, is it true? This story I'm telling. Her second question is, can you absolutely know that it's true? You kind of have to give it a second crack at that ego and say, of course, I'm going to affirm that it's true, but is it really, really true? And you might find that on further review, no, it doesn't really hold up. And if I were going to have to present this case in court, others would have counter arguments that would say, no, that seemed true to you, but in fact, no. In fact, in the work that I've done, not just in this story of B, but other ones, I've heard people refer to their guardian angel. The fact that your guardian, whether they call them guardian angel or spirit guide or whatever, I use guardian angel, that the guardians are always with you. And I've heard some of the people I've dealt with in the afterlife realms say, my guardian will listen to me tell a story and then will chime in and say, yes, that's true, but do you remember this part? Or much of what you just said is true, but what about this? And they'll augment the scene that you're remembering and bring other facts to bear that your ego wasn't considering, where maybe you had some that it sort of kind of shoots the bombast out of what you were angry or what about. And when I've seen that, people will say they always do it with such love. It's not like anybody gave you some stern, embarrassing correction in the presence of others. They just bring up something for you to consider that has such truth about it that you really can't deny it. You just have to say, oh, and be still and accept a version of the truth that you wouldn't have created in your own thought. Can you absolutely know that it's true? Her third one is, how do you react? And that is, what happens when you believe that thought? So that's really important. If I'm going to accept as true this thought that saddens me, how do I react? What happens after I believe it? I think a lot of grudges in families are really about someone keeps reacting to a story about an event that happened 5 Thanksgivings ago, or at the wedding, or at the funeral, or at somebody's graduation, or the time somebody got drunk, or whatever, and ruminate over past hurts and make themselves angry, or maybe draw other people into their dark story, try to help or get people to create alliances against one another and so on. How do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? That could really stop you if you let yourself take it in. What am I like after I believe that thought? Well, I'm reliving that ugly moment today, even though I could be doing all kinds of things today. What I actually am doing right now is picking at the scab of some wound. How do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? And then the fourth and last one is, who would you be without that thought? Who would you be without that thought? Kind of corollary to that, I think, is, who's in charge of your thoughts? Aren't you the ones thinking them? Are you free to think thoughts other than the ones you're currently thinking? I believe so. The fact that something negative happened, even if it was true, doesn't mean you have to keep thinking about it in the way that you are. Is there a different way that you could think about it that might not bring it into the present and cause anxiety or depression or anything like that? Anyway, that's the work of Byron Katie. This is what she looked like, at least at the time this picture was taken. And as I mentioned, she is on a podcast that we did not very long ago. You might enjoy that interview. A lot of people have. That one was very popular. The other thing that I wanted to share is not at all unique. I'm sure you've heard it before. I received a copy of this for high school graduation in 1974. That's a long time ago. In fact, we're coming up on our 50th class reunion of my high school in the not very distant future. But I received the Desiderata on a plaque that I kept with me, and it traveled with me through a lot of moves. I eventually gave it away as a gift because I knew what it said anyway. And I knew someone that I thought would benefit by its wisdom. You can find it online. It was written by Max Ehrmann, probably in 1927. It's called Desiderata, Desiderata. It's an unusual word. It just means desired things. And I'm going to go through it and just make a little commentary on it. He says, go placidly amid the noise and the haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence. Well, there might be noise in your head if you're grieving the loss of a loved one to suicide. But it's possible to be still. You can do it. I'll pray that you can. Find a way to be still. Do the breathing I said, or maybe the candle, the incense, or something. Go placidly amid the noise and the haste, and remember what peace there can be in silence. As far as possible, without surrender, be on good terms with all persons. As far as possible, without surrender, be on good terms with all persons. I try very hard to do that, and I've lived in religious community for my whole adult life, and I've pastored communities sometimes of, with a mass attendance of maybe 2,000 a weekend, with lots of people, with lots of different things that people can be upset about. And I just remembered that verse, as far as possible, without surrender, be on good terms with all persons. It's just simple wisdom. Speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others, even to the dull and the ignorant, for they too have their story. I might turn that around and say, that's what I think I do, mostly because I'm introverted. Listen to others and speak your truth quietly. That's kind of what I do. And if you can listen on more than one level, listen to what people are saying, and then try to listen for the Holy Spirit can help you if you ask, help me understand this person, because I'm hearing the level of data, words, but help me to hear what they're saying that might be around the edges, between the lines. I don't mean reading motives in that aren't there. I hope you understand. I just am saying there's a lot that we communicate when we're talking with other people that's nonverbal. Listen not only to the words that are coming out of a mouth, but the body language, the context, how it's being received, a sixth sense, if you will. Speak your truth quietly and clearly. Listen to others, even the dull and the ignorant. They too have their story. Avoid loud and aggressive persons. They're a vexation to the spirit. I hardly ever use that word, vexation, but without being obvious about it, I do that. When I'm around loud and aggressive persons, I take them in small doses, try to size up what it is they have to say, but I don't want to be around the volume and the aggression. If you compare yourself with others, you may become vain or bitter. For always there will be greater and lesser persons than yourself. Isn't that wise? If you compare yourself with others, and nobody says you have to, but if you do that, there are a couple of possibilities. One of them is that you'll think you're better than that person or worse than that person. You can become vain or bitter. For always there would be greater or lesser persons than yourself. So if you develop the discipline, and if this becomes a part of your heart, remember, I got it when I was 18 years old. When I catch myself comparing myself to other people, I'll stop and say, Nathan, why are you doing that? I don't believe God looks at me and compares me to other people he'd rather hang out with or anything like that. I just don't think I need to compare myself with others. Maybe you don't either. Enjoy your achievements as well as your plans. Yeah, I do. Keep interested in your own career, however humble. It's a real possession in the changing fortunes of time. Well, I've tried to do that throughout my life, and I've had roles that had importance and titles attached to them, but I've also done lots of simple stuff. Even when you're the boss, I was often cleaning the bathrooms in a Newman Center I was in charge of, because I was the host. People were going to come to this place I'm in charge of, and if something needed doing and it was something that I was capable of doing, then I did it. And it doesn't matter whatever your job is, be it ever so humble, it's a real possession in the changing fortunes of time. Exercise caution in your business affairs, for the world is full of trickery. All right. Just be careful. But let this not blind you to what virtue there is. Many persons strive for high ideals, and everywhere life is full of heroism. Don't you think that's true? And especially when you are near the center of a grief, when it's an immediate family member, close loved one who takes their life or who dies in a violent way, as so many of the people I work with do. One of the blessings of that is the gatherings for funerals. Oftentimes, people come together. I did a funeral a couple of weeks ago of a 95-year-old woman. Nobody in the room was as old as that. So nobody was there when she was born, but there were beautiful stories, laughter through tears and so on. And there were lots of stories about her heroic life, which was lived in relative obscurity, but there were people noticing because they benefited by her goodness. Everywhere life is full of heroism. Pay attention to that, because the trickery and the cruelty and all of that, especially in the airwaves and on the news, do a diet about that kind of stuff. Take in the information you need to be informed, but don't let too much of it drag you down, because the world is full of heroism. Be yourself. Especially don't feign affection. That is, don't pretend to love another person. Be yourself. Neither be cynical about love, for in the face of all aridity and disenchantment, it is as perennial as the grass. Be yourself and let yourself love. Be loved. Take kindly the counsel of the years, gracefully surrendering the things of youth. All right, well, look at this gray hair. Where did that come from? It used to be blonde, and then it was dark brown, and then it was gray. I wonder, if you feel like your best years are behind you, or especially because of the death of a loved one, those happy times are over, and the best is behind me. I hope you won't let yourself get in the habit of thinking that way. It will only sadden you. Gracefully surrender the things of youth and the things of your past. Try to live in the present moment again. Nurture strength of spirit to shield you in sudden misfortune. Nurture strength of spirit to shield you in sudden misfortune. Sorry, I'm stumbling over my words. I can remember my aunt, who was a first grade teacher and a Dominican nun, teaching me as a child that little people have little problems and big people have big problems. But while you're little, ask God to store away grace, like a savings account. Pray ahead of time for a rainy day. Pray ahead of time for whatever day in your future will be the hardest. And on that day, say to God, that day arrived. Would you help me? Because I have been asking for this help, for a long time. It's like a life insurance policy. It's something you plan for. There's going to be a bad day coming. Would you help? Would you give me the grace at that time to move freely and lightly? I remember when my dad was dying. He died over a long period of time from Parkinson's disease in 1997, and I prayed for the day of his death that God would bless me so that I could be of service to my family. I was already a priest. I know it would fall to me to lead funeral stuff, and could I please be given the strength to do whatever grieving I needed to do, but to be able to be available to other people and support them. And I remember standing over his dead body, still in the hospital bed, only within about 15 minutes of his death, and saying, okay, Lord, here's that rainy day. Please help me to be a blessing. I thanked my dad for his life, and I said, I'm going to do the best I can to lead all the rest of us in a celebration of your life at your funeral and burial. But anyway, I would recommend that practice. You don't know what the misfortune is going to be necessarily, but you can just say to the Lord, I know that you're the Lord of everything and that you supply daily bread. but I'd really like it if I get caught by surprise and something happens out of the blue or whatever, something is painful and shakes me, help me in that future moment. It's helped me. It says, nurture strength of spirit to shield you in sudden misfortune, but don't distress yourself with dark imaginings. Many fears are born of fatigue and loneliness. In my life, I've tried to guard my thinking in the last hour of the day when I'm tired and typically alone. I try not to let my thoughts go towards problems, not at that time of the day. There are lots of other times in the day where I can think about problems and possible solutions, but not when I'm tired and alone. So I'd recommend that too. Don't even pray about troubling things in the last hour of the day. Do that in the morning or at noon, not late in the day. Beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. Yes, discipline is good, but be kind to yourself. You're a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here. Doesn't matter who else has an opinion about that. You have a right to be here. You're a child of the universe. And whether or not it's clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. That can be difficult when there's been something like a suicide or some other calamity, ill health of diagnoses or all kind of different things that can come your way. That doesn't mean that God intends things to happen necessarily. I'm not big on that idea that everything is preordained or something. But once they do, they're your reality. And so even if something happened that was horrible, and I've been around horrible stuff, I live in the present moment and deal with it and help others deal with it. You've probably done that too. Be at peace with God, whoever you conceive him to be, and whatever your labors and aspirations in the noisy confusion of life, keep peace in your soul. With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it's still a beautiful world. With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it's still a beautiful world. One thing I'd recommend near the end of this episode is if you are moving through grief or depression, remember that it's still a beautiful world, but one of the ways to remember that very plainly is to make sure you have beauty near you. Buy yourself flowers, the kind in the grocery store that aren't very expensive. Listen to beautiful music. You probably have some, in your place. You probably have some music that you love to hear. I was mentioning earlier stuff like a scented candle, just simple little pleasures. I try to make sure, and I have a few movies that lift my spirit. I don't know how many times I've seen The Sound of Music. How did they make such a beautiful film out of being overrun by the Nazis? Well, they did. There might be sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, but it's still a beautiful world. Be cheerful. Strive to be happy. Strive to be happy. It doesn't necessarily come easily, but you can at least set your intention that way and try to be happy for other people. I don't mean in a fake way, but I've experienced it myself. I've asked for the grace to be happy in a moment where I didn't have a natural inclination to be happy, but I think it's possible. And I did call this podcast The Joyful Friar. Now that I've been doing this for the last year and a month, when I'm find myself being unhappy and kind of enjoying being unhappy, I do a little self-talk and say, and you call yourself the Joyful Friar, snap out of it, buddy. Cheer up. Let's think of positive things. Let's be happy. It doesn't mean you have to be giddy or insincere, dishonest. It's just a choice that I'm going to be happy because that's what I want to do. Well, remember, I'm praying for you, and particularly because this trilogy dealt with suicide, I wanted to tread lightly. I love you, and I wouldn't want to hurt you for the world. I hope not, that some of this didn't sound a little too, I don't know, like cheap grace or anything like that. But I really do believe that we can help each other move through difficult times. And to me, that was really what I was trying to do today. We'll go on to other topics in the shows to come. But for now, I am Father Nathan Castle. I'm grateful that you joined me on this episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. I'm praying for you. God bless you. Bye-bye. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Joyful Friar. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can visit me at nathan-castle.com. Send me a message by clicking the contact button. God bless.